Welcome to the Heroes of Reality podcast, a podcast about the game of life and the hero's journey we all experience. Let's jump in with our host, Dylan Watkins, as he introduces today's guest.
Welcome, adventurers, and on today's podcast, I have Dr. Patrick Porter. He is an award-winning author, speaker, and founder of BrainTap, the leader in technology-enhanced meditation. Dr. Porter pioneered the use of brainwave and entrainment to improve clarity, sleep, and energy, and remains at the forefront of the scientific research. I'm excited to talk to him about all things brain, neuroscientists, and beyond. So without any further delay, I'd like to welcome Dr. Porter.
Hello, Dylan. Great to be here.
Hey, I'm excited to have you. Thank you, doctor. I appreciate you being here. This is awesome.
Yeah.
I'm super fascinated with the way the brain works and how we can kind of like tweak on our own mind. It feels like the cheat codes for living life, being able to, work on your own source code. So I'd love to talk with you just a little bit about like what got you into the whole genesis of like, brain health, brain function optimization, and that. Like, what was the genesis to get you started on this hero's journey?
Well, it started, I actually went through my midlife crisis at 12 years old, if you can believe that. My dad was a chronic alcoholic, and he got help with something called the Silva method. Some people out there might know that. It's a meditation process, and he began to train people in Michigan. He was the leader, the trainer, the whatever you would call it, for the seminars, and we'd go out and help him do those. And so we started using, now you'd call it isochronic tones. They were playing it in the room and people would go to alpha. So it was a training process. And I used it for school and sports. And I went to school for electronics, but I kept helping him out with his seminars and finally got to the point where I think I'm going to do this psychology thing instead of the electronics thing. So I kind of married the two in what I do now. But I went to my undergraduates in electronics and then I went to school for psychology.
Have you seen that be able to really help you using technology and electronics to really enhance the spreading and the understanding of the way the brain interrelates with the human? Is that?
Oh yeah. Yeah, back in the 70s when we first started, I mean, we were looked at like we had a third eye, not in a good way, but like we were aliens. Because I would be sitting in the middle of the field, like in track, I was undefeated. So my coach was all worried because I was doing supplements before they were popular, and doing Charles Atlas courses, trying to get big and strong, and so I was doing biohacking before biohacking was popular. But I taught all the people in my mile relay team to meditate before we'd start, and we were undefeated. I mean, we crushed it, and it was all because we were all visualizing. We wanted that outcome, and really that's the hack. I mean, if you can get your subconscious to picture what you want, it'll figure out how to get you there. And that's the first step. And the next is the physiological effect. Most people don't want to spend the time learning. We use GSR machines for those people. It's galvanic skin response. You can still buy these on Amazon for like $125. You put your fingers on them and they give you a pulse. So you set it for 10 hertz and it'll beep until you get there. When you're at that frequency, it stops. So these are biofeedback trainers. Now we have neurofeedback. So now we can actually verify it with science more than we could before. Before it was like, yeah, I feel really good. And the little GSR meter went off. So I guess I'm there. But now we can use EEG, and we use devices like the Wavi or even the Muse, which some people, that device is pretty powerful for a $200, EEG reader.
Yeah. And the Muse has got a really cool, there is the main app, and then there's a guy who made like the side app on that thing. And you could actually just get the value sets coming in real-time streaming. And it's really interesting stuff. I don't fully understand the data while looking at it myself, but just seeing that there is a direct response and you can see patterns when you can get into different moods or mindsets. It's fascinating to do it. It's just currently I think we're at that spot where we need that subject matter expert to be able to interpret it, translate it, and say that yes, this is the data you're getting back, but you should probably whatever that might be, meditate for 5 minutes more, or do sit-ups, or whatever the data is. And so what would be your recommendation to people that are using these biofeedback devices that kind of have an overwhelming sense of data, like, and they want to take action on it? What's your recommendations for them?
Well, one thing is to regulate your breathing first and figure out if you breathe in, you're going to trigger the sympathetic system, which is what I call the survivor brain. And then when you breathe out, you're going to turn on that parasympathetic or that thriving brain. So breathe out twice as long and then watch the meter. Like you can fake out HRV or all these gadgets, but you can't fake out what's called the P300 score. That's like the deep cortical response that happens like through WAVI. So that's the one we do for our scientific experiments. But for the end user, if you can manipulate them or you can train your brain to do those, there's a sense of empowerment. For instance, if you're in too high of beta, which is, we call it the reactionary mind, that's where you might have a lot of fear, frustration. We know that cortisol is high then. So your driving behavior, emotion drives behavior. So that brainwave actually triggers the stress response, let's say. And it's also, most of our addictions are dopamine responses. That only happens in the beta brainwave. So if you can kind of step outside of the beta for a moment and get into that alpha state, alpha is really powerful. We call it the intuitive state, or that's where you have that. You also produce acetylcholine there. So your brain is instructing your gut to make those. And you can do that just by simple breathing techniques. And then you drop it down a little bit lower into theta, which is almost impossible to do. I mean, we've only had a few people. I'm kind of fortunate to go to India quite often when it was open to do that. And we got to measure gurus and all sorts of things with our devices. And of course, they can go there, hang out there, have a conversation, and be in these deep states where most people in America can't even get to alpha. And then you drop down into delta. Now we're finding there's another brainwave, like for those people that are high achievers or high performers, they call it the flow state. Then we trigger a state called gamma. And we've actually done some experiments in Dallas with Dr. Rosenthal, who's doing some things with PTSD with psilocybin. And we've been able to mirror the effects of the psilocybin with just light, sound, and vibration. People were having journeys without taking the mushrooms. And because we were triggering that kind of frequency response that happens in the brain, because we have these receptors, like we have cannabinoid receptors, we have opioid receptors. The only reason that we have those experiences is because our brain can create those experiences. So for lack of a better word, we're hacking the brain to get those states without actually having to take the substance, just using frequency.
It's super fascinating. There's a couple things I have there with that. One being is that you're actually using light and vibrations to trigger flow states. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. And the lights, is it just lights on the eyes, some sort of patterns or things like that they actually experience through the eyes? And like in terms of vibrations, is it vibrations on the entire body, or is it in a certain spot of the body, or
every cell of our body has what's called chromophores. These are kind of, think of them like batteries that hold a charge. And sound, like if you ever been to a party and maybe you didn't really want to go there, but they started playing music you liked from your high school days, and all of a sudden you're tapping your foot, you're singing, because your brain is always converting sound, light, and vibration to energy, ATP, in the body. So what we're doing is we're going to use sound, specific frequencies of sound, but the vibration actually comes from the light. Like the ears, we have ear lights. And when you put the headphones on, we have a light pulse, and it pulses at, let's say, 187 times a second. That matches the Nogier frequency to turn off the sympathetic overload and turn on your parasympathetic. And it does it without your conscious awareness. It just, this is what happens when we're sitting beside the ocean, let's say, when we're just sitting there listening to the waves and we start to zone out. That's because the ocean has a resonating frequency of 10 hertz. It's the same as alpha. And we do the same thing with a candle. Like you might have heard of what's called a jyoti meditation. That's where when they they do a breathing exercise where you breathe out, you try to make the candle just kind of flicker, but you're looking at the candle. That candle flickers at 10 hertz frequency. So you're actually using, I like to tell people what we're doing is we're taking ancient traditions and we're making modern technology. So they were doing it before, but it took a candle. We can do it very specifically with LEDs because we can change the duration and time of that light pulse, and that becomes a response. So it's almost like Morse code, but the cells are receiving that information, not just the brain. And so we're learning in that way.
And so it's really interesting. And so it's almost like these states of consciousness, all of them, it's a two-way street. Physiology affects psychology, psychology affects physiology, and what you're doing is you're basically tricking the body and say, okay, if you were say happy, then this is the way the world would appear to you. This is what things would sound like. This is what they'd look like. This is what it'd feel like. This would be the senses and the things that you'd perceive on the way back. So what you're doing is you're priming the environment to basically allow them to slip into an easier state of flow or alpha that allows them to then enter that state more frictionlessly, and then be able to then create those neural pathways that allow them to slip back into those patterns. Is that kind of an accurate description of what the purpose of the stuff is? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. It's going to train the brain so that we're doing what's called eustress. That's a healthy stress or a happy stress, but it's still stressful to the brain because we're giving it light, sound, and vibration all at the same time. So they're getting overloaded, but the brain likes it because the brain loves patterns. And then what happens is once we open up those neural pathways and keep the brain active, because usually what happens under stress, just as an example, let's say you're watching a scary movie. Most people in the scary part, they close their eyes and they go, it's just a movie, right? They're disassociating from that. But one side of your brain, literally, if we had somebody hooked up to an EEG reader and they were doing that, they would see their brain, their frontal lobe would actually shut down because they don't want they want to forget what they just saw. They want to pretend it didn't happen. And so many people, when they meditate, even because we're hardwired, we close our eyes, the frontal lobe shuts down, they fall asleep. Meditation isn't sleeping. It's like you have an awakened mind, right? And so if we can train the brain to stay awake during meditation, you actually get these experiences like people usually have to take an external substance, whether it be a plant-based medicine or, you can get it from lots of different sources.
I'm very familiar. Yes. I've spoken about this on a number of podcasts, my experience of testing different types of plant medicines and theogens and cross-referencing them with like biofeedback devices to kind of see what the output are. It's very interesting thing. I had an experience where I was in the jungles of Peru a couple of years ago, and I went through 5 ceremonies of plant medicine with ayahuasca, and I had the aura ring on as I was going through that, and I had these weird numbers that came back, and one of them, it looked like I did like 5.5 hours of REM straight. I don't understand it, but it was just like up, over, and across, and it was just I've noticed that when I've been sleeping, I was like, what is that about? So, but again, it's you're
That's where you have lucid dreaming. So you would have those visions like they talk about with IO. I've not done that yet. I'm still looking forward to that journey. I would love to do it. And so I think that now it's becoming more normal. You know what I mean? It's not so weird. Like, I mean, there's a place in Florida, actually, a church that you can go to and do an ayahuasca ceremony. I thought that was interesting. You just got to join their church for the day.
It was like looking at that, there's a bunch of different places. The reason why it's allowed is because of the legal rule of it's a religious practice and going through. And so I have friends that are part of those groups, but I've definitely been I've gone to a place to go do it. And whenever anybody's ready, the thing is that's it's a brute force way to get there, right? Well, this is more of a soft, nurturing, gentle feedback, and using things like light and simulations, things that'd be more socially acceptable to get you along. But again, it's like whatever gets you along the paths to be able to understand that, because I truly do believe that the quality of your life is your ability to shift the states that you're in. And then if you can control and if you can be aware of the current state that you're in and move to one of choosing, whether that's an alpha or a gamma or whatnot, then you really feel much more empowered as an individual versus feeling like a victim because you are in this disempowering, parasympathetic kind of state where the world's against you and all things are scarcity and everything's a danger and a threat. So like understanding how to control that and shift that with whatever means we have available is, I think, a wonderful gift to give people.
I think people are finding that out too. In science, they call it psychoimmunology, where we can measure that with HRV, right? The optimistic person has the greater HRV score. A pessimistic person usually tanks because they're fixed. They look at every opportunity as a problem instead of the optimist looks at every problem as an opportunity, right? I mean, that's kind of the self-help gurus mantra, when they're up there speaking. So
and it's one thing to it is one thing to say it and logically understand it. It's another thing to have it ingrained in your limbic system and your body and your soul and actually believe it and take action on it. Yeah. Because like you can see someone there that's just like struggling, like everything's an opportunity. And they're just like shivering. Right. You're like, I hear what you're saying, but every other signal you're giving me is the opposite direction. So, you know, this is great that things like this exist. Question for you, when you're talking about there's these deeper levels of like theta and gamma, I know that there's the whole 40 years of Zen thing that they said, oh, this is where you get to after 40 years of Zen on a mountaintop. Is this the areas of brainwave spots in the brain that you're talking to? Is that something similar or is it different?
Well, I'm not sure how they evaluate that. I mean, I think it's interesting. They say 40 years of Zen, but the reality is that I've never seen a neurofeedback process that got permanent brainwave change. And because it's like going to the gym. When you're there exercising, you build muscle. When you leave, if you don't keep building muscle, you know, I tell people it's like brushing your teeth. If you want to have clean teeth, you keep brushing them. So in this case, when we're using light, sound, and vibration, it's affordable so people can keep using it. You know, I'm not saying it's going to be permanent. You know, one thing about the nervous system, there's no permanent nervous system. And even if you get 40 years of Zen, which I don't know how they're evaluating. That's a marketing term.
Yeah, totally.
That's not a reality. I think it's pretty cute, but it's not reality. The reality is that if they were 40 years of Zen, they would not occupy space and time again. They would go back into the world and go, this shit ain't working. You know, they would realize that this game, they wouldn't play this game anymore. You know, look at what happens and, you know, these gurus drop out because they're going, this is crazy. Why would I keep doing this? So at the end of my life, I give away all my toys and I didn't win anything. You know, it's like we want peace of mind daily. You know, people will pay big money to have an outcome, of course. So, but the reality is that they want something they can have daily. You know, like that's why with BrainTap, we tell people, wake up in the morning, do some digital coffee. I mean, I'm not against coffee. I like coffee myself, you know, but wake up your brain, get your electrical system online. We're actually light beings. This is one thing, Dylan, that most people don't understand is we communicate through biophotons, which means light. Every cell of our body, every 40 seconds, our body is changing. So when you went on those journeys, actually, you yourself occupy this body, but you're not this body, right? So you got to disassociate from the physical confines of this world. Well, there are people that can do that just by meditation, like the story of, you know, when the Beatles went over to India and then their guru took that handful of acid and 20 minutes later said, you really want to get high? You know, it's like, what do you mean? They couldn't understand it because he basically muted or whatever. He made it inert. It wasn't, the acid didn't affect him the same way because he occupies a different space. You know, and I think that we have the most powerful computer on earth, you know, and it's more than our physical. Our physical is more that's how we interpret it. But there's our electrical system. When we die, they say we lose 3/4 of a pound. So what is that 3/4 of a pound? That's who we are. We've never seen that, you know, but some people have been able to experience that kind of ecstatic state where they're in touch with the universe, because that's when you know all things. You know, some people get these brief glimpses of reality and then they get snapped back into this physical world and, oh, what the hell are we doing here? You know, there's so much more going on.
Yeah. And there's always consistent cases of whenever people get to those levels, the stories become, you know, trite to hear them, but for the person profound. And they usually have things where they come across and they're like, I realize that I am one with everything. All things are unity and everything is love. Right. And you get that. And like, but like, again, it's like one thing to say it. It's another thing to like experience it to a level that will shift what you do on a daily basis. Right. And I know that one of the things that I did that was it allowed me to shift my perspective. And then when I came back and I looked back at like, oh, here's all my old bullshit. What do I want to get back into? I go, nope, no, thank you. And I made some fundamental life changes because of that. And
that's what I'm saying. That's what happens when you get that glimpse. And it also happens when people go through near-death experiences. You know, I've known so many people over the years with my practice that have come to me. They go, I'm going crazy. I shouldn't be here or whatever, you know, because they saw whatever was real.
Yeah.
And this isn't real to them anymore.
It's
so
reel it and real. But that's what part of the things that the people are paying for. Like people want this like on-demand enlightenment, right? But they also want to be able to function in society and be a success. They want the enlightenment, but they want the success as well. And and if you go too on one area, you become off balance. Like I truly believe that we're not just like one thing that does what we seek a balance of where we want this homeostasis of different elements working together. The thing is we're in a constant rate of adaptation, right? We're constantly adapting or to whatever situation, whether we're stressed or not. And so it's really interesting to try to strike these balances. Are there ways that you can tell that people are in certain alignments or out of alignments? Or do you have like some sort of map for yourself to be like, okay, this is Bob. Bob is here. Bob wants to get over to here. And this is the kind of the mindset. And this is the protocols we need to put him through to get into where he wants to go. Or how does that work?
We have a device that we can measure. It takes about 5 minutes, and we can get 9 different parameters of the nervous system or the electrical system. And it can tell us, we know if the meridians are open, if the spine is flowing. They say the spine is the keyboard of the brain, if there's no restrictions. And this is all through resistance. When we have resistance or stress in our body, it's not functioning right. Yeah. And we also know that a brain, Ann Weiss actually did most of the research on this. She wrote a book called The Master Brainwave, and she traveled around the world looking at gurus, masters of industry, sports performers, and all the top performers had one characteristic in their brain the same. They had about 45% of their brain in beta when they were awake, about 30% in alpha, 20% in theta, and then the rest was just barely there. They didn't know about gamma then. But now we know about gamma, and we're finding that when you get into that gamma state, that's when you start getting a glimpse into those other realities, that flow state. Like when people think about, I just use basketball as an example. Basketball is high level physics. They don't realize it while they're dribbling the ball and running around and throwing the ball up. But they're balancing in space and time, and they're doing all these things. But our brain just does it because we've layered on top all those lessons. So somebody who's in that flow state, what we know is that if somebody is if the brain is out of sync, like unfortunately, as we get older, I like to say better looking and more intelligent with age, because I agree. Our brain gets dysregulated because of stress. So the more we allow, and you said it exactly right, if you're not able to shift gears out of stress and into a neutral or a thriving brain state, you're gonna have diminishing returns on your life. It's gonna cost you in ways that you don't want. That's why there was a really good book out in this. I think it was in the 80s or early 90s. It was You Don't Have the Luxury of a Negative Thought, because they talked about how the body responds to that. The body basically, when Buddha said, "He who angers you conquers you," now medical science has proven that to be true. The more anger, the more fear, the more anxiety, all these negative emotions have to have a corresponding chemical reaction in the body. And what happens to us happens through us, or what happens through us happens to us, however you want to think about that. So as we think about these thoughts, and that's the same thing I tell people, why, regardless of your religion, when Jesus said, love your enemy, basically you're projecting love through your body. So you're going to have all that love and gratitude and acceptance, and your body's going to benefit from that, and it's going to thrive in those environments. And I just think that so many people leave it up to the news, let's say, or their family, or their, I like to say, brothers, sisters, teachers, and preachers. These are all people that tell us what to think and how to think. And we've lost the capacity for rational thinking in one way. But when we get into these altered states, we start realizing, wow, I'm more than I was told about. There's more potential here. Like even is something as simple as remote viewing. When you think about people who die in the operating table and come back and they say, I watched the operation, I know what happened. And, I know my brother-in-law is a surgeon. So, they have these things happen all the time. And it's like, they just blow it off. They go, he's just imagining, but how could he imagine exactly what was going on? So our consciousness is much different than what we've been told. And I think we're now at a jumping off point, because in the 80s, when I first learned about this, like I said, my dad, he used to run a program called ESP Forum in Kalamazoo, Michigan. And we brought out some pretty wild people, that had skills that, like one guy, Gil Gilly, he could literally, you think a thought, he could tell you what you're thinking in your mind. And I had so many people that didn't believe it. I said, come on over and meet Gilly, just think something. And he was brought up with Ernest Holmes, who started Science of the Mind religion. And he was born that way. He didn't go to a training. That's the way he was born.
What do you think that is? Like, it's a really interesting thing, because like there's two pieces of me. One piece of me has experienced the deep side of plant medicine and felt connected to the cosmos, and there's that side of me. And there's the other part of like knowing that some people are just really good at like mindsets and like reading people, and I don't want to be tricked. And I have both sides of those pieces. That's like, and I'm trying to understand, is that just something that like the plant medicine side of things, that they're dialing into something, or are they just really good at reading people? Like, what is that thing that you're talking about?
Well, yeah, in my mind, I think there's an infinite number of potentials from any moment in time. So
yeah,
to get like a quote psychic reading is just going to give you direction, because you have choice. Yeah. There's an infinite number of them. Whatever you choose to do was already predisposed, because it's infinite. There's no one way for you to go. You choose your direction. And, in the multi-world theory, you're doing it at all those others too. So there's multiple Patricks out there doing this interview. You're asking different questions, and, we're going through and there's others where I'm sitting back. I forgot about the podcast altogether. And these are different world theories. And I think that I always tell people, because one of the things that I never really agreed with is that we create our reality. Reality is already created in an infinite number of ways by a power far greater than our conscious minds, but we get to perceive the reality that we want. It's kind of like when you buy a new car and you didn't think anybody else had that car, but as soon as you drive it off the lot, you start seeing them everywhere. Yeah. Because now it's in your prevailing awareness and it becomes in the foreground of your brain. They were all there before. We take in 2,000 pieces of information through our eyes every second. Yeah. Our brain is really a filtering system more than it is, it documents everything, but what's important to us, it remembers. Not everything, just what's important to us.
100%. It's one of those things that you have this weird fallacy in your mind. Things happen that these uncommon commonalities that you are at top of your mind, you'll pick those things out, whatever those things might be, that the world's against me or the world's for me. It's just, but you are perceiving and making your own reality, because you're only paying attention to these 3 things or whatever it might be, X amount of things that you have in your head. And then I could see that. And that really does shape your reality, because it doesn't necessarily matter what happens. It just matters like what you do to it. Like, this is that fantastic Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning, which is all about that. Like, it's not what happens, it's how we respond to it. The hard part is consciously decoupling from that just innate reaction, because those stories seem like the hard-coded ground truth of our life. And then we have to find a way to be able to, oh, wait, no, that's a story. Let me just pause on that and be like, does that story serve me? And but actively being able to be aware of that, see it, dissect it, and then choose another path. It's like how to be healthy, diet and fitness. Just do it every day. Never have sugar ever again. Super easy statement. Super easy statement. The challenge is actually going through and completing it. So even
in my book, my first book that I wrote, I have a chapter, How I was Blessed to Be the Son of an Alcoholic, because I believe whatever your greatest challenges are, that's how you get your superpowers. Yeah. Every hero, like even your podcast here, everybody has when my daughter was in school, she was in drama, and they said there's only 138 different scripts. You could fit everybody into those scripts. We all have, like you're saying, story. And I said, man, I'd like to have those 138, because I bet I could fit everybody into those. But if you listen to the stories, people, like some people, oh, poor me, my dad was an alcoholic, I should be an alcoholic. I'm not saying that some people don't have a hard time with that. I'm just saying I was blessed because my dad got help. So I'm not the guy sitting on the bar stool. Not that I'll have an occasional drink, and it doesn't bother me, because I don't believe in quote alcoholics. I believe people can either drink or can't drink, and their body has a reaction to it. And if your body has a reaction to it, you shouldn't do it. Like sugar. Some people can't have sugar, their body's off to the races, but some people want to do things that are harmful to their body but want the benefit of something. It's like you got to find another way to do it.
Yeah. And that's the challenge is well, there's a couple things. One, you're talking about like learning the lessons from your parents, right? Because you want to break those chains, right? Like like I had like a father-in-law, like a grandfather that was an alcoholic that was abusive. So my father was never that way, and he learned that lesson and passed another lesson to me, right? And then I learned another lesson from him, and you carry those things on because you do look at that. And you're like, what do I like and what do I not like? I always look at it kind of like operating systems. Like they're like an older, like, Windows 99 or Windows 2000 and they try to pass along the good, like this is how it works, but they also accidentally try to pass along viruses like the alcoholism or whatever those things are. And you kind of have to like block yourself and like, no, thank you. I'm gonna skip that one. You go on with what you're gonna do. Cause that's what we're slowly evolving, and we're getting it from our parents, but then we're also actively working on it ourselves. And those, what I call, for hero terminology, crutches turn into capes if you can find the power within on that. So I absolutely agree with you on that. So do you feel like the genesis of you understanding the technology and then seeing what your father was doing to understand himself and how that interplay worked together gave you the superpowers to be able to go out? Is that the, could you describe to me like because of that, the game you now play, being inspired on that journey?
Right. I think that you can always take what I would call the easy path.
Yeah.
That's just it's kind of like taking the blue pill or whatever, and you can pretend you don't know anything. And that's what most people do. And Deepak Chopra said it best. He said, 97% of what's going to happen to you tomorrow, you know about today. So what are you pretending not to know? So if you wake up every morning, we all have this, like talking about computers, we all have this boot up, right? When we're waking up in the morning, we boot up, just like those old computers. We used to be able to see it. Now we don't. It's so fast. But our parents gave us that first operating system. Mm-hmm. And we got a chance at about 7 or 8 years old to start rejecting it or accepting it. And I remember for me, my mom, when she passed away, she gave us a baby book where she kept records of all the weird things we did as children in the book. And one of the things that she gave me, there was a note in there and it said, "You can't control me with your voice." And she said, when Patrick handed this to his father at 5 years old, he was scared to death. So my dad was yelling at me and I wrote a note, said, "You can't control me with your voice." And I just handed it to him and walked away. So and I always wondered, my dad never got mad at me. Like all my brothers and sisters are like, "What is going on? Why doesn't dad ever yell at you or get mad at you?" And my mom said, from that day, I just told him, I said, "Yelling at me is not going to work. I'm not going to play that
game." Like, that's a very baller gangster move to do at 5 years old. Yep. To be like, your voice doesn't have power over me. Like that's powerful, especially like the going to your father for saying that. Was that so? From there, do you feel like that's a true resonant message that carries throughout your life? Like part of like people don't have power over you with their voice?
Yeah, I don't let other people control how I feel or what I do. I mean, I was one of those people. In fact, the guys I went to school with in high school, they can't believe I speak for a living because I never said 2 words to anybody. I was more of I was awesome. A really good athlete, but I was an action person, not a talker, and when I heard talkers, it just turned me off. People that talk the big game. I'd rather do the big game than talk it. In fact, I perform better under pressure than I would if there was no pressure. And I think that when I went to college, of course, it was a little bit different. Of course, you're around people that are just as good as you. There's the margin of error is much greater, but still it was like, and then when I got out, I had to, in order to promote my business, I had to speak, because that's what you have to do. So I had to learn some skills. I had to go out and get some training. And I think most people aren't willing to do something really bad to be really good. You've got to be willing to make a lot of mistakes. And I thought to myself, I screw up all the time. I mean, I'm really good at screwing up. But I'm really also really good at forgetting all those screw ups when I do it right.
Yeah.
And I think that's what most people don't do.
Do you think the reps that you got from like college and an athlete and learning to push your own body and things like that, do you think that were there lessons from that you took and brought into the world of entrepreneurship and kind of carving your own path this way? Is that something?
Yes. I always look at every job that I can do anything that I set my mind to, but I might not be able to do it all today. And I think so many people, they go into business and they think, I'm going to be a success overnight today. Well, I tell people look at me and they go, well, you're so lucky. I said, 30 years to be an overnight success. It's like they didn't see the, how I had to talk my wife into, it's all right. We're going to get through this. It's like where I have people that think I never get upset. I do get upset, but it's like, why would I show that to everybody? What is that? How is that going to serve anybody? I'll do it in a way that's supportive. And I'm a firm believer that, like in sports, you've got to exercise. If I'm not doing well at something, I'm going to go train and get really good at it. Just as an example, when I started playing pool, just as in college, and I was terrible at it. So as soon as I got out of college, I bought a pool table. And even during college, actually my last year, I had 7 guys living in a house. We bought a pool table. By the end of that year, I was really good. I could go out and make money playing pool. And so I'm just one of those guys. If I do something really bad, I'm going to go learn how to do it as well as I can. I can't, if I I didn't play basketball, but if I did, I could never be Michael Jordan, right? But I could be the best version of Patrick. That's what I want to be. And I'm one that, that realizes that you're not going to be all things all the time. You got to find out what brings you pleasure and where you want to have your challenges. Because if you don't have challenges in your life, you're not going to be very happy either. So many people go, I don't want any stress. Well, you don't want to grow. You don't want to learn. You don't want to develop. That stress, even your ayahuasca experiences were stressful to the body. That's why they give you a pillow and a blanket and a bucket, so your mind gets to go do what it wants to do, but your body's still back there doing its thing.
Yeah, you use all of those things. All those tools are a necessity for that journey. And I do truly believe one of the things you're talking about here is, I think it's like a Lombardi quote, is that there's no greater feeling for a warrior to lay exhausted on the battlefield knowing that they gave it their all, being able to just put it all out there, and that feeling of growth. Because in the moment you're like, this sucks, this is terrible, I want this to be over. But then afterwards, like, I'm so glad I did that. There's like this faith that you get, this belief that you get, and this just overall evolution that we seek that progress. We're weird because we want the progress, we want the transformation, we want the hero's journey, and we want to be incredibly comfortable and do familiar things as much as possible and limit uncertainty as much as possible. It's a weird dynamic that we've got going on for those two pieces of the paradigm. For you, like, let me ask you a question then. What are a couple of things that you kind of laid into some of these things that people need to do that they struggle with? Let's say specifically around the brain health, neuroscience, things like that. What are the typical, what I would call threshold guardians, or things that usually stop people with mindset and the neuroscience to get to where they want to go? What are those roadblocks that they face?
I think the number one thing, and we've measured people's brains. You've probably heard the expression, the masses are asleep, right? Well, we proved it. We've scanned over 30,000 brains, and most of them are 70% in delta while they're awake. That means that the brain is either totally inflamed, has TBIs, or they just don't want to be here. So the best thing you can do for your brain, even for sleeping at night, is to start your morning off with what we do, BrainTap. But if whatever your meditation practice is, energize your body. And that's why, like, even Paramahansa Yogananda has energizing exercises. Yoga was designed to get you ready to meditate, not just to do yoga. And some people skip the yoga nidra, right? They skip the meditation part, but that's what you're doing it all for. So you can bring all this energy, which could be called the Kundalini as part of it, but all that energy rushing up through your spine into your brain, activating your pineal pituitary region, and really resetting your gut through that way. Because you have brain biome now, they know, just like you have gut biome, and you have to get that ready. And when we sleep, we should be detoxifying. But so at night, when you're going in bed, most people go to sleep all wrong. And what I mean by that is they think they're supposed to close their eyes and go to sleep. That's probably the worst way you can sleep. And we just did an experiment with BioStrap, with the company.
Yeah.
We gave them all BrainTaps. They gave us all BioStraps. And we were like, our staff, they're using the BrainTap, blowing out the number. And I said, well, do some exercises before you go to sleep. Not only just, you could do a meditation, but when you're there, practice doing that 4-8 breathing. That's probably the easiest way for people, and do a body scan. all the energy from the day, your cells have memories and they store all that information, like the body's like the hard drive, but we can clear that cache just like you would with the computer. We need to clear out that cache. And if you do that through breathing right before you go to sleep, I still get energy. I can make energy rush through my body at any time. I just lay there and I'm just flushing my body out. And then once I realize my body's in a good state to go to sleep, which usually takes between 10 and 15 minutes, now I'm going to sleep deeper, and I'm going to get 100% or 97 every night, whether I sleep 6 hours, 4 hours, 3 hours, it doesn't matter, because we really only need 1 hour of deep sleep and 2 hours of REM, and our body will do what's in our studies. That's what we've shown. So the main thing is those are 2 times. And then the third time is every day at 2:00 around the world, wherever you're at, your body's going to drop 2 degrees in temperature. That's because we are biologically tuned to the light of our sun. And that sun tells our body what to do. And that's when our biorhythms get a reset. So these bodies were designed for the Serengeti, not for New York or San Francisco or LA. We're supposed to be taking a nap next to that zebra that made it, where their buddy was dinner. They're now sleeping next to you and we're resting. But what do most Americans do? We go get coffee, tea, or chocolate. We push through it. And that stress, if we could just relax, what our studies show, you can do a breathing like Wim Hof breathing or something like that to really energize your body, or do a meditation or yoga in the middle of the day, you're going to increase your energy by 80%. We live in an energy economy. So the more energy we can get our body, and that's what when we're talking about the highs and lows, it's really how are we running energy through our body. We're not just, as I said earlier, we're not just absorbing light, we are light.
Yeah.
So we need to magnify that light and get our vibratory frequency up to where it needs. And then everything else comes into play.
Got it. So when you're saying 2 p.m. our temperature drops, or you're saying 2 a.m.?
2 p.m.
2 p.m. our temperature.
It actually increases in temperature at 2 a.m. Your temperature goes up. That's why some people get the sweats and they wake up.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so it's interesting because I've noticed that, like, a pattern for myself, like especially when I go off coffee binges, because I had to do certain dietas and things like that where I can't have any caffeine, and I have to do stuff like this. And so my hack is set my timer for 20 minutes, go to bed, put my night mask on, and I'm not going to sleep, but I just go in, out, in, out. And I'm just like trying to think about as nothing for 20 minutes. And I come back in and I'm like, okay, that's all I'm getting. It's time to go into it. And that's been my hack. So you're saying that
that's intuitively you're doing the right thing. I mean, if we'd have measured your energy in your body, well, there's more than air in what you're breathing, right? There's the next information for the next moment. We're always being fed information in the form of, light or sound or vibration. So our body's interpreting that, and it's our resistance to that flow that takes our energy away. There are people that sleep very little and are still very, very healthy. Sleep is necessary for most people. A lot of sleep. 8 to 10 hours. If I sleep over 7 hours, I get a bad score because I'm just laying there going, what's going on here?
Yeah, that's how your body's like, it's time to get up. You're like, but I feel like I deserve more sleep. Your body's like, but you don't need it. You're like, but I want it. Yeah. I've seen that battle back and forth. I get about 7. I've seen other people, they have to have 8 and they want 8 in a row. And if 8 in a row, you get woken up, then it's a bad day. And you're like, it's like, it's some high standards of sleep. So then, okay. So look at these things. The one thing I want to look at this, especially in the areas of, you're talking about meditation, brain health for performance. One of the areas that's coming up that I find to be really interesting is a new athletic field, a new performance area that's emerging. And I've just started to see them use a little bit of meditations for mind health, but I want to see if you have any thoughts around esports gamers, people that use video games or virtual reality games as a professional sport, and what does mindfulness and meditations and all the things you're talking about with BrainTap, like, how does that relate to the world of esports?
Well, we're actually, before COVID, we had an EAS team that we were doing a research project with in Denver. Hopefully that'll get re-engaged. They're still kind of a little crazy there. But as soon as it does, we're going to get it. And also that Dr. Rosenthal, he works with the Dallas Cowboys EAS team. They work out physically. They're just like the football players. I mean, and they're doing it. What we found is playing those computer games destroys your brain. So what we did is we showed them that, hey, when instead of going and having your break with a Coke and a couple Kit Kats and, you know, all these things that they do to juice up, do a BrainTap session. And we saw some incredible, we were going to, also when the brain's like that, it creates almost a PTSD or PSD because your brain is processing, like when I'm looking at the computer right now, my brain's processing every pixel. Even though I consciously think I'm seeing this whole image, our brain, it's kind of like that Rain Man when they dropped the toothpicks and he knew 1,264. You know, our brain is doing that. We just filter that out because we don't need to know it. So all that's going on. And then when we're playing those games, whether it be football or single shooter games, you know, that's really intense. That's even more intense than the physical reality on the brain, because you could take somebody who plays a football game and their brain looks nothing like that gamer who played the same game but on a computer.
So then in terms of it's got the same one, it even has more of an effect because you're taking in more lights, more dynamic sounds. It's and your brain's just as engaged. So it's got as not if more wear and tear on the brain. And so brain taps or other types of mental resets will actually increase the performance quality of their output, because again it's a competitive sport.
Right. So, we were showing that a 20-minute reboot gives you 80% of the energy you had in the morning, and they were crashing to almost 10% of their energy stores. Some of them were going so long that they were passing out in the chair, you know, while they were doing it.
I've seen it. Have you had any experience? Because the new evolution of that, and this is just my world, is virtual reality esports. Have you come across any of that stuff? Because it's even more so because your entire field of vision is now taken over, and everywhere you look, and you're now completely gone into that reality. So I don't know if you have any thoughts around the impact of virtual reality esports as well.
Oh yeah, I think, well, the brain, it is real, and it's more real than this reality because there's no escape. If you're playing a football game, you can go to the bench and turn your head and the back game's going over there. This you can't do, right? It's in your face. And I think that part of it is just really refocusing on what's meaningful. I think it's in short burst. I think it's good for the brain. But when you go past that, you know, when you go just like working out your body, and that's what I tell people is we're in the area of the brain now. 2020 will be like body fitness, you know, in the 70s and 80s when Arnold came over here and did these movies and everybody started physically working out. Now the brain is finally getting its due. And what'll happen is we're gonna have to master this virtual reality because it's not going away. It's awesome. Yeah. And what we're talking about doing is having people visualize like a game, like let's say, because we have mirror neurons. That's how we learn as kids. So if we could picture a professional, let's say tennis player, doing the backhand that we want to do, we watch them do it, then it fades into like the strobing lights like we use and puts them into the thing about alpha and theta. It creates hypermnesia or super memory states. So now the brain can remember what they just saw, those muscle memories. It's not quite like downloading like the Matrix, but it's as close as we're going to get until, you know, Elon Musk has his way. And
it's coming. You know, it's one of those ones that's like, I don't know if I'll sign up for it unless I can download a language in like 8 seconds. I might have to sign up for that whole new level of mankind.
You would love our science officer. He speaks 6 languages.
Oh, wow.
He went with me to India. In the 3rd week, he's speaking Hindi. And I said, Francisco, when did you learn Hindi? He said, while we were here.
Wow.
Because if you don't, so if you learn 2 languages before you're 7, your language circuit doesn't shut down. And we learn languages by immersion.
Yeah.
Not by books and not by, I mean, you can learn them the way they're doing it. But if you could go over, like if you went to immersion camp and went over there and you had that brain circuit still going, you could be like Francisco and learn a language in 2 weeks.
What's interesting is that, so one thing that I've came across is there's different minds, right? And we have, and I'm going to do the bro science layman version. If you could translate this would be fantastic. When you're trying to learn something, a new skill, and there's a professional giving you advice or guidance, or you're trying to learn something, you have 2 minds. You have the flow mind, and then you have the critical mind. And the thing is that the critical mind is trying to understand what's really going on. But then when it gets so critical on the flow mind, it shuts down, and you actually don't absorb any of the learnings. It's like trying to force yourself to remember something versus being in the flow mind and absorbing all the immersions of what that thing is. Being aware and going through it is that flow mind that is the true learner. But there's that really hypercritical self that wants to learn, but then maybe hates itself or begrudges itself. But it's all that critical negative energy stuff that comes in that messes with that flow mind. And from what I've seen is the people that can just let go of that, go in and immerse themselves and just be aware of what they're doing, they will adapt to learning code, learning sports, learning any of these new things. They don't get that sense of overwhelmed and self-judgment. What is that? Like, if I don't mind me.
Well, yeah. I think I don't need to translate. That was exactly right. I mean, I wouldn't say it. I would say it like that if I knew your language. So in the process, when we did Silva, every person, 100%, I never saw anybody fail. They were medical clairvoyants during the seminar. There's an exercise you do where you put a screen up, a silver screen. The person across from you thinks of a person, doesn't tell you who it is, but they have a problem. They have to have a physical problem, and they always guess right.
Interesting. So are they drawing up this, like, so there's a silver
just
screen
in their mind's eye, they have a screen, a silver screen, and that person thinks of the person. So as a medical clairvoyant, there are people that can do this. It's kind of like the most sophisticated diagnostic machine. They go into the body and tell you what's wrong with them. So in Silva, they taught you this, and it always worked. But then the next day, when they tried to do it outside of the seminar, only about 40% could do it.
Set and setting.
Mm-hmm.
That's so interesting. We're weirdly connected to everything. Like we have mirror neurons. We are connected to each other in some way. We feel each other. We're connected and we're sharing data. But then also that set and setting is a really interesting thing that we get kind of nestled in, like in a house set and setting or the other environments. It's weird. We get this weird connection thing that allows us to do more in certain environments and makes us different than if we did in a completely different set and setting. We are like,
well, like I was saying earlier, our genetic code literally changes every 40 seconds based on our environment, the foods we eat, the conversations we're having with others and ourselves. All of those are changing all the time.
When you say that, are you talking about your epigenetics? Your switches are turning on and off, and so technically your DNA is changing. Okay, I see what you're saying there.
So it's done through light. It's done through biophotons. That 99% that they couldn't map, it's because it was always moving.
It's junk DNA. It's nothing but junk. We don't need that. Let's just.
Could you imagine you're getting tested to graduate and you answer one question out of 100? I just did the test. No, that's not even close. But, because we're infinite. We're infinite beings with potential that we haven't even tapped into. I mean, when we're seeing these movies on television with people with these special gifts and encounters. I mean, when my grandson even playing the computer, I think he likes playing some games, and he's like, blows me away because he goes, Grandpa, I mean, I can't do that. I wasn't born with there was no computers when I was growing up. I got to see the computers come out, and there were no screens. We got to, then screens came out. Wow, life's never going to get any more advanced than this. And then I go back and watch Star Trek. I start laughing.
Dude, I 100% agree with you. I mean, I remember going over to my friend's house because he had the Atari, and it was like black and white, and like it was the coolest thing ever. And oh my God, but we get better. That's one thing we do. Like there's a couple things that we do that's a superpower. Like one is our ability to collaborate through space and time using technology. That's one of our superpowers. Two is our ability to evolve ourselves. Like we are this like self-evolution, group evolution things that just get better over time because we're all like hands washing hands, getting better through time and space. It's a very interesting thing to see as we spin down this. Where do you think, for you, especially like with BrainTap and the evolution, where do you see this going for you? What's the evolutionary steps of your company and the integration with all this technology coming up? Do you have like an idea or like a holy grail concept for that?
Well, our mission is to better 1 billion brains. And I think the reason for that is there's something called the morphogenetic field that they have been able to weigh and measure. It's not a metaphysical concept anymore. When you improve, Dylan, you improve the world. We know that. And so if we can all be at that same frequency, right now there's, one person in light, the expression is how many to lighten this room I'm in, It could be as dark as it wants. I turn on that light, it's light. So we need to wake up people. And I think we're going to live in a whole different universe.
Yeah.
And I think light, and the reason I chose light, sound, and vibration is, we can't go into all of it here because we only have a few minutes, but that's the building blocks of creation.
I love it.
We're gonna use that. We're not what we think we are. We're far greater. Yeah.
That's so powerful. Like, so that's a morphogenic field.
Morphogenetic.
Yeah. Morphogenetic field. It's so fun that I totally resonate with this thing. So one of the things that like I do primarily is I build transformational VR experiences. I build experiences that are both entertaining and not so transformative. I do it for esports games. I do it for organizations. I do it for nonprofits. I do things. I literally just ran a whole event teaching about that stuff. And we talked about doing the Billion Worlds project. We're building worlds of transformation and helping people get better. It's the same thing, but like using, again, my area is virtual reality and then using psychology and those things to integrate those things together to do that. I love the mission because I do think what you're talking about here is like civilization is a race between utopia and disaster. And if we can all kind of push in that direction and the direction of utopia, we can avoid the disaster. But in order to do that, we have to heal ourselves. We have to get past our own bullshit stopping us and causing the pain and the fear and the anxiety and the doubt and all that stuff. And the way to do that is to go into the brain and be like, okay, where am I at and where do I want to go? And if we could get a billion brains to do that, we could all collectively shift into that direction. So I love that mission that you have. With that, what is your dragon? What is the thing that you don't know if you can beat? And it might eat you whole while you're on this mission. What is that for you?
Well, I think the main thing is that there's too much to do and not enough time. I was actually born. I did one of those rebirthing classes, where you go back in time. I went back to my mom. I said, I thought I was born in a cab. And she goes, you were in front of the hospital. She said, you were born early and you've been in a hurry ever since. And I remember, so I think and I always think there's never enough time.
Yeah.
And it's not just a Jim Croce song, so it just seems that way,
That's beautiful. Yeah, no, you're right. But that's the greatest gift. The greatest gift is to the enjoyment of the time that we have and the feeling that we get that we've used our time well, whether that's with our loved ones or to help other people. So I think that's beautiful. Is there anything else? And by the way, it's been wonderful talking with you. I've really enjoyed all the things you're sharing, and thank you for being here. Is there anything else you'd like to let people know about what you do before you tell them how they can find you and get a hold of you and find out more about what you do?
I think just suspend your disbelief long enough to have an experience. And I think you mirrored the same thing, Dylan. You have to have an experience. Talk's cheap, action puts points on the board. We've got to get people in action.
Yeah, that's awesome. You're totally right. It's one thing to think it. It's another thing to say it. It's a whole other thing to do it, and even farther to live it. Right. And those are like layers you go down that gets deeper and deeper. So yes, 100%. Finally, how do people get a hold of you? How do they find out about you and your audio books being translated in 12 different languages? Like, how do we find out about this?
Well, the easiest way is for 99 cents, they can go to braintap.pro and they're going to get a copy of my book in 15 days on our app, and they'll get a lot of information. If they want to go to social media, just put #Dr. Patrick Porter and they'll see, or #BrainTap, even better, because we have a lot of sports athletes and professional athletes and things like that using it. And they post, and for those that want, there's some Victoria's Secret models out there using BrainTap that post too. So
this is motivating. Yeah, no, it's awesome. No, congratulations. That's beautiful. So braintap.pro for 99 cents. You too can find out the secrets of the brain. No, it's awesome, man. I really, really appreciate this. Dr. Porter, thank you so much for the time and all the work that you do. This has been an absolute pleasure. And that's all we have. So thank you so much. And I will see you in another reality.
All right. Thank you, Dylan.
Have a beautiful day. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Heroes of Reality podcast. Check out heroesofreality.com for more episodes. While you're there, you can also take the Heroes quiz to find out what kind of hero you are. Or if you have a great story and want to be on the podcast, tell us why your hero's journey will inspire others. Thank you